Great to be with you again for another Action for Happiness event. And this evening, I'm delighted we're being joined by Elisha Goldstein on the theme of transforming anxiety. And it's so fantastic to see so many of you joining us already from all around the world. I can see well over 2,000 participants and so many of you welcoming each other on the chat already. Elisha, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's so great to be here. It's so great. I'm so happy to be here with everyone. Thanks for having me,
Really
Mark.
exciting to be sharing your work. Been a long-term fan and follower of all of your great wisdom. You are, of course, the founder of the Mindful Living Collective, and we'll talk a bit more about that during this conversation. But just for the benefit of all of you joining from all around the world, thank you for being here. We always have a wonderful community spirit on these webinars. People will be sharing a lot on the chats. But I'm happy to say that Elisha will also be taking us through a couple of interactive sort of mindful exercises during this evening's connection. So we may turn the chat off for that just so we can all focus and be present in the moment. We'll be talking about the theme of anxiety, but actually a lot more about how we can respond well to what's going on in our lives and live more wisely and compassionately, and how our well-being is not only relevant to ourselves, but also in terms of our relatedness to each other. So Elisha and I will have a sort of free-form conversation for about half an hour or so, and then we're really looking forward to sharing some questions from you as well. So please do use the Q&A function, and we'll try and get to as many of those questions. There's an upvote feature if you like other people's questions and you'd like to see those answered. And as always, let's keep the chat and all the interaction as friendly, supportive, and caring as it always is. So thanks again for being here. And Elisha, in a moment, I'd love to hear and remind people of your story and what brings you here. But I wondered if we could invite you to start with by just helping us all arrive here in a mindful state of a bit more calm and awareness, and perhaps take us through one of your mindfulness exercises.
Great. Yeah, a wonderful way to start together. And so let's just do that. Let's begin with this practice. This is something that you can do anywhere, anytime. What's so wonderful about this practice is it helps us step out of autopilot and just come back into this space and just release into a place of a little bit more relaxed awareness. And that allows us to take in everything that's going to come in the next moment. So I want you to just get in a comfortable position. You can do this either seated or lying down. And this will just be for a few minutes, right, Mark? Yep. And so, you can do this with your eyes opened or closed, whatever feels most comfortable for you. And this is something I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we're just going to do it. It's something that's a little bit of a mix of a mindful check-in. Again, you can do this a few times a day, very simply. And then it's also something that we're going to add in this layering of just releasing into this space a little bit. So, okay, well, let's just jump in for a moment. So get in a comfortable position, again, seated or lying down. The only thing that I'd recommend here is that you have some kind of straight spine, and that's just for an ease of breathing, really. Okay. So starting off with just taking a couple deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And just the exhalation, it's an opportunity of just releasing a little bit. And just noticing your body here, the positioning of your body, and also just how your body's feeling in this moment. And particularly if you're noticing any areas of tension or holding, including the face. Sometimes we forget the face is part of our body, and see if you can actively allow those to soften. Stress is held in our bodies, and so here we're actively noticing where that is, and just offering an invitation to release. If you need to stretch that area of your body to open, you're welcome to do that. Massage that area of your body, you're welcome to do that. Just this offering of releasing. Also being curious of how you're feeling emotionally as we begin. If there's a feeling of feeling comfortable or uncomfortable, maybe neutral, maybe noticing where that emotion is in your body. And also the quality of your attention right now. Noticing if your mind seems busy and scattered, and it's okay if it does. We're just settling into being aware of that, or noticing if it's staying present to being here. Again, either way is okay. If you are distracted, if you do notice that, just taking note of that, taking a deep breath, softening your body. It's an opportunity to release into this space, being present to what's here. And just for the next few moments, noticing how your body's naturally breathing. And as you breathe in, it's an invitation to just be present. And as you breathe out, it's just an opportunity to release a little bit more, any lingering tension or holding, any busyness of mind. It's as if with the inhalation, we're saying welcome. And with the exhalation, softening our bodies, releasing. And just noticing how you're feeling right now. Just being aware, a moment of noticing how your body's feeling now. And we end by just taking a moment to really just acknowledge yourself, no matter what your experience, the intention of attending to your life, to your mind, to your heart. Just a moment of acknowledging yourself for creating the space for your own learning, health, and well-being. This is an act of self-care, so just that moment of acknowledging yourself for taking this time. Now bring awareness to your face. If your eyes are closed, gently letting the light seep through, opening your eyes.
Thanks, Elisha.
Yeah.
That was a perfect way to start, and I feel calmer and more focused already. I would love us to get on to this challenging world we find ourselves in, and think about some of the positive responses to that. But I'd love also to share a little bit of your journey. I think both you and I have had times in the corporate world in our past and have been on rather big life transitions since. Perhaps you'd like to share a little bit of what's brought you to where you are now.
My story is similar to a lot of people's stories that come that arrive in being curious about mindfulness or compassion work, or the intention of even bringing happiness as an action in our lives, which is I was working hard in the corporate world, like you had mentioned years ago during the dot-com boom, and I was really successful at it. My whole life, I'd never been like the best at anything. I was always kind of jack of all trades, master of none type of idea. That's the way it felt. And when it came to the corporate world and sales, and I was selling telephone lines, that was before like we had computers that we were working on. I was doing really, really well, but that was in the outside world. In the inside world, I was working hard, but playing a whole lot harder. And you can find me, if those of you familiar with San Francisco, you could find me south of Market Street late at nights, like peeling into the next day, abusing my mind and body with drugs and alcohol. But you would never know it necessarily until at some point you did. And I ended up I started ignoring my friends and family or friends from the past anyway. And I had an intervention, and I inevitably was told like, hey man, go take a break. Like, you're on a path that's incredibly destructive. And it was hard to see because I was successful again on the outside. So it didn't feel like the ramifications were really there, but they really were internally. And I went away to a retreat for a month down in Southern California. And it was there that I got in touch with this man who basically introduced me to mindfulness by eating an orange. And he had this whole experience like set up for me. And he said, just entertain this. And I was kind of rolling my eyes in my head. And he was saying, just like entertain this for a moment. And those of you who are familiar with mindful eating, basically, I wasn't familiar at the time. He held the orange in front of me. I looked at it. I saw the dimples, and then I peeled back the skin and saw the zest come out, which kind of surprised me at that moment. I wasn't expecting that, and saw the membranes of the orange. And I'd never thought that they had like veins and membranes in them. When you pay attention to them, you can see this. And then I put it in my mouth, and it was just exploded, and I could see where all the taste buds were in my mouth, and it was just the most delicious orange I'd ever had. And he said, well, how are you feeling? More importantly, yeah, how are you feeling right now? And I said, I feel, my body feels really relaxed. I feel good. And he said, well, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if you had a little bit more of this in your life? And I said, great, that sounds great. Sign me up. I'll take it. And so for the month, I was in this enclosed environment, and I felt like I was, enlightened or something. And I was voted at the time most likely to become a rabbi. And because I come from a Jewish background, and then I went back to my old environment, and within 2 weeks, I was back to my old ways. But a seed had been planted. And the important part of this story to me is that with our own exposure to things, we can practice, and seeds can be planted in us. And it's not only up to us. Our environment really matters as well. And the people we surround ourselves with, and the things we surround ourselves with, also have an impact on us, and can cue our brain in old ways to bring up old habits and old identities and old patterns that we can become more aware of and begin to break free from those. Because over time, what happened was I started putting myself in situations and around certain people where I started engaging and learning more about mindfulness. And even though, and I'll just mention this, Mark, because this is important, specifically to this topic, I struggled over that time with panic attacks at times and deep insomnia. And no doubt a lot of people who are listening right now also have had a similar type of struggle. And it's through this practice and through my experience of it and trusting it, things that we'll talk about today, that I was able to overcome those experiences of insomnia, gain way more internal confidence inside so I can focus on what matters and begin to enjoy life more. And also gain a whole lot more confidence over the triggering of panic that would come over me too. And that's how I got to where I am today.
And that feels incredibly relevant in terms of today's topic. We've titled, as you know, this event "Transforming Anxiety," and we're at a challenging time as a global family, and of course, in many myriad of different ways as individuals, with, I guess, what feels like quite a transitional time as we are dealing with, well, at least twin, if not multiple, challenges around, pandemic, worries about the future of our climate and ecosystems, a sense of conflict and divide and challenge, and of course all of the day-to-day anxieties, challenges, sleep issues, relationship challenges that are just part and parcel of being a human being. So I guess before we sort of come to some of your responses to anxiety and to create a bit more of that equanimity and so on that I think you've discovered personally, how would you frame the sort of situation we find ourselves in, this sort of modern culture that's bringing up a sense of anxiety, and what's going on here for us?
I feel like historically, there's been many people have understood how the brain works in the business world, and our political world has understood this, and certainly the news world, and preys a little bit on our fear response that's here. And so it kind of triggers through enormous amount of stimulation that we have nowadays to trigger a certain kind of fear, which puts us into a survival mode. And then we're just become reactive. And then we'll just, we'll be more likely to, choose the quickest, easiest, fastest response, because that's what we need when we're feeling fear. Now you mix fear with uncertainty, and then you get anxiety. And so, and then you do that over time, and we live in this, and many of you might feel this, just this background, this underlying anxiety that's just like going in the background. Then we have this pandemic on top of it. And I'll say even this, Mark, even with the nuances that are there right now, so many people all over the world are in very different places. I've spent the last 2 or 3 months talking with people, having individual calls with people all over the world to better understand, like, what's going on right now with you? What's your greatest frustration right now? And what are you really needing right now in your life? I've never done that before, reached out and had all those individual calls. But what I understand is, even within the United States alone, or even within the UK or other areas, different areas of the geography, different people are experiencing different things. Some people are experiencing a little more freedom. Like, for example, with me personally, here we have in Los Angeles, we're in a pretty good place as far as the pandemic's concerned. However, now there's the nuances of with the vaccine, who's getting it, who's not getting it, different ideas behind it, families and children get it, and now it's being really, and so the nuances of the conversation, what's happening with the summer, what's open, what's not, for kids, and so there's all these there's so many different reasons our brain can have to mix fear and uncertainty together. So we're in this kind of endless cycle. There's so many people, more than ever right now. Here we had in the past, I think the CDC put out something in the United States around how many people on average, year after year show symptoms of an anxiety disorder. And it's usually like 1 in 12. And this last year, it's been 1 in 3. And so a lot of us are struggling right now with that triggered nervous system reaction. And that's basically what it is. It's our body is highly sensitized right now. I think if we could peel back the flesh, we'd see some more inflammation than we've ever seen before, like within bodies that are happening right now, which puts a little monitor in the back of our brain saying, like, okay, let's look out for this. Let's look out for this. There's more sleep issues than ever before. Maybe there's more, kids are on screens more than ever before as well. And so there's a lot of reasons for this call, for this talk right now, to help us find ways to not only gain back control of our nervous system, take back control of our nervous system, take our life back, take our attention back, but also so we can open up and choose exactly what you all are all about, action for happiness. So we have the wherewithal to listen to all these other great conversations you've had with amazing people, and be able to even put those into practice. This is the foundation.
Let's come to, you've framed that so well, and I think you're so right about that mix of fear and uncertainty. But let's come on to some of those sort of practical responses and solutions. The fact there are over 3,000 people altogether on this live right now means we're all hungry to find ways to respond more wisely to this situation and to how our brains work. I know you've got lots of tools and techniques, and we've already experienced a bit of your mindful practice, but one thing you mentioned to me was this idea of the 3 R's model. I wondered if you could perhaps let us know what that means and how we could use it.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're feeling anxious, the last thing we want to do is have to remember something. That's just not how the brain works. It's hard to remember what we need to do. So we have to keep things really, really simple. And so I developed this model to help do that. Our brain can typically remember 3 things more simply. And so, and when it's something like 3 R's, makes it even more memorable. The first thing we have to understand is that when we're having a fear response, or when our nervous system is on fire, or when we're feeling frustrated or angry, or when we're just really emotional in a particular moment, blood flow tends to recede from the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with emotion regulation and impulse control. It's where we get perspective from. And so it goes to the more central region, the emotional regions of the brain. And so what we want to do is we want to try and bring that blood flow back and balance out the brain. So what we know is that one of the things that helps out with that is by actually naming a feeling. There was a study that was done years ago at UCLA by Matthew Lieberman and Naomi Eisenberger, where they had people randomly assigned and they had them look at different pictures. And under one picture, the pictures were of a man really angry, showing a really angry face, and of a woman showing a really fearful face. And one said Dick and Jane under it. And the other one had the same pictures, but they asked the audience to say, well, can you name how they're feeling? And what happened was the one that saw Dick and Jane showed a lot of activity in the amygdala, the area of our brain that's involved with our fear response, amongst other emotions too. That's not the only thing it's involved with. But and the group that actually said, oh, he's feeling anger and she's feeling fear, showed more activity in the prefrontal region. So we know that, and this is just something that, this is one of those examples where science shows us things we know, but helps us believe it more. And so by naming the feeling, by naming the situation that's here, we can balance out our brain more and give ourselves more with the wherewithal, step into that space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl talks about. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response, and our response lies our growth and our freedom. So we want to get into that space and widen it. And the first thing we want to do is be able to name it. So we recognize it. That's the first R. We recognize it. It's very simple. Recognize, say fear, fear, fear. I'll never forget when Sarah Lazar, who at the time was a professor at Harvard, done a ton of research around mindfulness and neuroscience. She got up on stage for the first time in front of 1,000 people. And the first thing she did, this was years ago, I remember being like right there with her. And the first thing she did was said, fear, fear, fear. She named it. She named it. And the whole audience like laughed a little bit. Everyone was together. They weren't laughing at her, but were with her. And by naming the fear, 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 we're like, you can imagine that space between stimulus and response going boom, boom, boom. We get more opportunity, more blood flow. You can imagine the pumping going boom, 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 pumping blood flow back to our prefrontal cortex. So that's the first thing. We just recognize it. That's a way of stepping into awareness, stepping into mindfulness. The next thing we want to do is understand that, well, okay, so the stress and anxiety is stored in my nervous system. Trauma is the same way. It's stored somatically. That's why we have such a huge push now for somatic experiencing or sensory motor psychotherapy, these types of things where we're now trying to release the trauma and stress through our bodies. Very wise action. And so here we go. We notice that it's in our nervous system. So we want to work on releasing it. We don't want to think about it too much. Typically where we go is we start thinking about it and we start thinking about how to combat it, or reasons we shouldn't be anxious or reasons we should. And that's kind of like asking advice from a friend who's in panic, what I should do about this anxiety right now. And that friend in panic is going to be like, I don't know, maybe you should, I don't know. There are a lot of things to worry about. And so it doesn't really help, right? So we don't want to go into our thinking, we want to go to our body. So it's stored in our body, so we want to release. So how do we release? So first we recognize, we widen that space, right? We name it. Then we realize, we come to our body. Where is this? Where am I feeling this? In my stomach and my shoulders? Am I feeling it in my face? And so we quite literally take a couple deep breaths, or maybe we roll our shoulders, or maybe we actually do a stretch, or sometimes I tell people, sometimes like shaking our bodies out a little bit, or you'll see in some work that some body workers, like in massage, you'll see how they sometimes take each finger and if you've ever done that before, and they squeeze the finger and they snap it out. They're taking stress away. You can do that with yourself. Put on a song and dance, make it playful. Just let your body begin to like move and release a little bit. That's the key. Not about your thinking or your mind. Anxiety's in your body. It's working on releasing it in your body. Your body's a barometer for how you're feeling moment to moment. This is where we want to pay attention. This is where the release is. A couple deep breaths can even be helpful. So my suggestion always with the release part of the practice is play with it and see what you notice. In other words, nothing's a one size fits all. There's no, this is the release practice. It's yoga for you, or you're done. You'll notice what supports you in releasing. And again, try on different things and play with it. I gave you a number of examples, but here we go. Just kind of play with it, right? And so then we want to, after we do that, now what we've done is we've gone from that space between stimulus and response from here. Now we've widened it to here, but we want to just kind of like open it up, right? And so now in that space, we can now we have the wherewithal to ask our question. We have way more access to our prefrontal cortex now. We want to ask the question, what is it that I'm actually needing right now? What is it that I'm actually needing right now? Like my nervous system is in this way. Now I have a little bit more attention and awareness. Like, what am I needing? Maybe what I'm needing is I'm needing to do this. I'll just say that I'll give you a number of different examples because I want to show you how varied this can be. I'm feeling anxious right now. I can feel that. I'm working on releasing it, still here, a little bit. Maybe what I'm needing is to talk to a friend right now and connect with a friend who can really understand me. Maybe what I'm needing is to dive into this meditation, this relax and retune meditation. I have all these meditations, by the way, on my YouTube channel, free. You can go go into any of those. You can, maybe I'm needing is that. Maybe I'm just needing to take a walk outside and move my body. Maybe I'm needing to just lay down and let the sunshine hit my face. Maybe what I'm needing is a drink of water. What am I needing right now? So what I suggest to people to do, so you don't have to think about it too much, is make a list, five things maybe. What are 5 things that are needs maybe that are supportive to you when you're feeling anxious or fear? So in other words, what we want to do is we want to help them be top of mind. You can even carry a card, or if this is something really triggering to you, you can even carry a card around in your wallet or your purse, and that says top five needs and or actions, right? And you can just peel that out in that moment and say, well, what are some things? So you don't have to think about it too much. Because again, when we're feeling anxious, it's hard to think about something. And then when we can't think about things, we get more anxious on top of it. So there it is: recognize, release, refocus. And I'll end with this just little piece, which is, it's so important with anything anybody ever gives any of us as like, hey, try this practice on, to have a playful mindset with it. So what I mean by that is like, bring a beginner's mind to it. Like, just, it's not about the outcome so much, but like, what am I noticing with this? Can I be more playful with this? And be curious about it and not be so worried about the outcome so much. Because when it comes to anxiety and fear, that's what your brain's already doing. It has plenty of practice with that, focusing on the outcome and being worried about the outcome. So we're peeling that back and saying, I'm just going to play with this and like see what I notice. And as practice, do this practice when you're not really that anxious and see what you notice in those moments. And then it will make it more readily available for you and top of mind in the tougher moments that are there.
Thank you so much. I mean, so let's just to recap. So recognize, release, refocus were those 3 R's. Why don't we try and do what you've just suggested and sort of maybe take at least the first of those 3 steps as together as a community now. So if anyone would like to, why don't we try and bring to mind something that is a source of anxiety or frustration or stress for you at the moment? And maybe if you feel so willing, you could just really briefly share that on the community chat, so we have a chance to bring to mind that sort of sense of what is this I'm holding right now, the recognize step. And then maybe after we've seen a few that people share, Elisha, you could sort of help us think about how we would release and refocus with those. So some of the things I'm seeing coming up here: helping son with anxiety, a court case, husband being ill, feeling inadequate, phobias, not sleeping, general fear, difficult sibling, spiraling rent, phone calls, presenting, awaiting a heart scan result, grief and death, feeling lonely, customer challenges, perfectionism, imposter syndrome. Wow, I'm really feeling this. This is really, thank you folks for sharing this. It's very powerful to see so many things that I guess lots of us resonate with, but a real sense of the breadth of challenges we face: new job, chronic health issues, decision making, overwhelm, fear of dogs, eating disorder, relationship challenges. Elisha, how are you feeling seeing this list of recognition?
Yeah, I'm just putting my hand on my heart because there's a lot, right? And the one that calls out to me, which is, there's a number of them, but when Nicola says, how can I help my son with his anxiety? So, or when someone's saying, because this is going to be relevant to somebody else as well, who's just worried about themselves, is we always want to focus on ourselves first. So if I'm wondering how I can help someone else with their anxiety, that means I'm feeling anxious about it. And so what I want to do is recognize that first. And you could see, like, as I recognized that, I didn't even, that breath I just took, that wasn't intentional. That happened automatically. Because when I recognize it, what happens is I step out of the autopilot, that loop, this anxious loop. In Uncovering Happiness, I talk about how there's this loop that's here: thoughts, emotions, sensations, and actions. And when you name that, recognize it, you've stepped outside of it. When you step outside of it, your body, your nervous system is now outside of this automatic loop, and we'll come back into, we'll start moving back into a place of balance a little bit. It won't go all the way back into balance, right? But that breath I just took happened automatically by just recognizing for a moment that feeling that I was having. And, you know, with that idea of recognizing, helping my son with his anxiety, as someone was mentioning here. And then what do? I recognize, I release. That was, my body automatically did that. Or we can move into that release space. Other people here said, I listen to music, I walk, I do yoga, I drink water, think of something funny. All these things help me, right? I'm just reading someone else's comment here. And then we ask ourselves the question, with the refocus, what am I needing right now? So I would I'd invite you to, as you're doing that, to recognizing, like if you're thinking of a challenging situation right now, you're recognizing it, not recognizing just the situation, but recognizing the feeling that's here. Sometimes what's helpful in recognizing the feeling is noticing where it is in your body and just placing your hand where you're noticing it. It just is like an extra recognition of it. Also, I'll just mention one thing just from the field of science of how this might be helpful is when you touch your body, and some of you might know this, but I'm just bringing it top of mind, your brain has to map that part of your body. That's how you feel the sensation of the connection. And when it's doing that, it's turning the volume down on your thinking. Those two parts of the brain are inversely correlated. This area called the cortical midline and the insula, which is behind your prefrontal region. The insula maps your body, maps awareness of what's happening in this moment. The cortical midline is where we're self-referencing and we're planning and trying to figure things out. It's typically where we're maybe mind wandering or thinking. That's where we're defaulting to. And so by touching our body, it turns the volume down on that. So it's a little trick to help recognize what's here. And then the releasing, go ahead and kind of do this with me right now. If you're feeling something right now after you did this, and you mark too, and if you, as you wrote something down, see if you can notice where you're feeling this in your body, and see if you can ask yourself, see if you can consider your move, whatever it is, towards releasing. This could be a couple deep breaths. You're not on camera, and so you can get up and do a little shaking if you want to. You can do a little dance. You can stretch the area. Sometimes it's just enough. Stretching the area where you're feeling the contraction from your nervous system holding on, because that's what's happening. Your nervous system is literally holding on. And so we're opening up that part of our body. Maybe breathing in and bringing your breath in, stretching that area a little bit. Breathing out, telling your mind release, telling your mind release. And this could be like a little soothing with it. And then the refocus is, after you do that, what am I needing right now? Right now, maybe we're continuing to converse here. We're continuing to attend to this conversation. But maybe you just want to stay with yourself in this kind of like being here, being present, with just releasing a little bit more, maybe being kind to your body, opening up, softening these areas that are here.
Well, I was working on something myself, which has been a cause of anxiety for me. So I'm grateful for that support, and I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who's been sharing on the chat, not only those moments, those causes of anxiety, but also some of the things I've seen people sharing that they do to release as well, whether that's connecting with nature or crying or talking to others or moving. So thank you so much for your openness as always, everyone. It's really, really inspiring, I think, to see these responses as a community. Elisha, I wanted to come back to a point you made at the start, which I think is so important, especially in the context of this lovely supportive community we have with the Action for Happiness movement. You talked about the environment matters. So of course, a lot of this is within us, but of course the world around us, both the physical situation we find ourselves in, but increasingly I come to think that our relation with the world around us, our connection with others, our connection with a sense of purpose and community feels so important too. Would you like to say a bit more about the environment and how we can think about that?
Absolutely. Let me just note to the couple people here who asked if crying is a form of release. 100%. Just consider your physical body is actually releasing. And so crying is wonderful. and to allow your body just to release and not criticize yourself for it, but just allowing this kind of release. Sometimes it's kind of like your whole body's shaking while you're crying, and that's wonderful. Just let it be, let it out. And sometimes, by the way, like shouting and like opening your chest and yelling is sometimes a form of release. Like allow yourself to do that, especially if you feel a little bit more internal. Like play with that, like maybe in an area where people aren't all around, if you have that, and just allow yourself to do that and feel the release from that. In some way, that's kind of an empowered release. That's an empowered release, and allow yourself to get into kind of a potent pose and, let it out in that way. Again, all with the mindset of play. The mindset of play is like, what do I notice as I do this? That's key. Okay. So getting to your question, Mark, 100%. If we look at quantum physics, if we look at any of the world's wisdom traditions, when we go to the mystical ends of them, if we look at the Big Bang, wherever we want to see, whatever someone's origination story is, it all started from a single place, it seems. And then there was, if we look at, if we just look at the science piece, there was this Big Bang, let's say. And so we all, as the saying goes, we're all made out of stardust, right? And so we just have these rudimentary eyes, as beautiful and amazing it is if you have vision to be able to see the different colors and shapes and amazing things around us. If we just pay attention to that, I'll give another little anti-anxiety / happiness tip in a moment around that. But if we pay attention, like on just like a practical level, we are totally interconnected with our environment. When you walk in, science shows that when you walk into a crowded, busy, cluttered room, we tend to feel more tense and anxious. When you walk into an open space that's like serene, we tend to feel more calm. When you walk up to a friend that feels trusting, you tend to be relaxed. When you walk up to someone that is different than you, that you would naturally maybe have an implicit bias around, then you might be a little more tense and guarded. We're totally interconnected, right? When you walk into a room and you smell a delicious pie, or whatever your favorite food is, you feel this openness and expansiveness that's there. If you smell garbage everywhere, you tend to kind of feel closed down, right? In general. And so we are totally interconnected with our environment. So the news, as an example, and this is not news to know this, but the news and the way we engage with our digital devices in general, and we've been kind of like thrown into a trance in some way to do, create an enormous amount of tabs in our brain that naturally leads us to feeling overwhelmed. And if we already have a propensity towards anxiety, maybe from a genetic background or trauma or stress, we're just like throwing kerosene on already hot coals. And if we don't, we are typically overwhelmed or don't have the ability to pay attention to what matters because we're totally overstimulated. Our nervous system is totally overstimulated. And so when we're looking at the people we spend our days with and the contacts we make, it's really important to consider, just from a people standpoint. I do this in like all my retreats that I lead. I do this kind of social audit with people. And I say, okay, well, so if you look at who you make your most contact with in the day, and that, yes, messaging counts. I want you to just check out and ask yourself on a scale of 10, whether this person in general is, to you, your interactions with them, not that the person is good or bad, right? But your interactions with them, are they nourishing, depleting, or neutral? We're just taking a simple social audit. And then I do that with also we talk about the things the activities that are in the day, right? Engaging with our phones, our technology, brushing our teeth, every little thing, nourishing, depleting, or neutral. And so we start seeing people's eyes start opening to either two things when we do this exercise. Either people say like, wow, I've never noticed how many nourishing people and nourishing interactions I have in my day because my brain's not just attending to them. So I asked them in that moment, like, go ahead and send them a text like right now and let them know like how nourishing you are to me, right? That gives you an extra boost. That's a happiness boost. It's an anti-anxiety boost to reach out and make a connection with someone and like make their day, right? And then the other thing that some people realize is, wow, I have such a dearth of nourishment when it comes to the people in my life and or the things in my life and the activities I'm engaging with. And so that's when we can start kind of making a list. Okay, so let's look at this now. Let's look at like things and activities, and let's make a list of what things are you not doing that are nourishing, or what, and so we can begin to integrate, um, replace some of the depleting things with some of these nourishing things that are more anti-anxiety and resiliency and happiness things, or spend a little less time with the depleting people, or shift the way we're relating to the ones that we can't spend less time with, and engage them with a bit more understanding and caring, because it's not about them so much. It's more about reversing our nervous system around them and allowing ourselves to be more resilient in the face of the difficult interactions that are there. And by the way, of course, and you've heard this before, sometimes we're the difficult person.
Hmm.
And so we have to also be aware of that. And so, everyone wants to feel cared about and understood and feel a sense of belonging. But doing this audit of our environment and the people and things and activities can really open our eyes to either enhancing what's already good and giving ourselves the juice of it, which can become an anti-anxiety and a happiness factor, or allowing us to get a bit of an awakening and begin to reconfigure things in a way that's way more supportive for us. When I was doing this exercise, and I'll just leave this example, one guy told me like, wow, I've had this bike sitting in my garage for years. I've always wanted to ride this bike. And I realize now, like, that would be so amazing for me. And have a road right outside my house that I can do it. And I've just never done it. I just don't give myself permission to do it. And there's these things in my day that I do that I'm sitting there scrolling forever. And yeah, it's totally depleting to me. And so we started working on him, just swapping it out. It could be a simple type of thing, but sometimes you need the awareness and insight and permission and encouragement to do so. And that's when we want to wrap ourselves around those people.
I think this is why the mindful practice is such a fundamental skill here, because that ability to notice and then to think, how do I let go of some of these depleting things and bring some more of these nourishing things, becomes, as you say, it's not really rocket science. It can be small substitutions and changes in our daily practice, but actually really transformational. And actually, there's so many more things I'd love to build on with that fascinating topic, but actually I feel a duty of care really and responsibility to come to some of the really important questions that the audience have been asking us while we still have time together. And by far the two most upvoted on the system are both to do with overthinking, which I know is relevant to anxiety. So Roxy has said, how do we control overthinking and worrying that things will go bad? And Emma simply says, any tips for overthinking?
Oh yeah, I would just 2 tips for that, which I just want to keep it really simple for us and not overlook and reinforce some of the things we've been saying. Just to reinforce this for you, thinking is fueled by how we're feeling, and thinking encourages how we're feeling. So it's like this loop that happens. The intervention is not with the thinking initially, in my experience. If you're in a balanced place and you have the wherewithal, you're in that space between stimulus and response, you can do an inquiry around your beliefs and thoughts. Like, you can ask yourself, like, is it true? We can look at like Byron Katie's 4 questions. It is absolutely true. It could be so helpful to do that. However, in those moments, typically the blood flow has receded to the emotional center of our brain, and we don't really have the wherewithal to do that necessarily without the help of somebody else. So if we're on our own, what we want to do is recognize, if I'm thinking a lot, I want to ask myself, how am I feeling right now? Like, here is this body. Like, we can repeat that over and over again. Here's this body. Here's this body. We want to come back to the body. We want to ask ourselves the question, okay, I want to stop, take a couple deep breaths. You'll see I have a stop meditation on my YouTube channel that we can keep kind of reinforcing these practices in your daily life. Because after this call, you want to implement things to practice. But we want to stop, take a couple deep breaths, observe, oh, here's this feeling I have. My mind's thinking, racing. But really what I'm doing is I'm feeling this clenching in my chest or butterflies in my stomach, tension in my shoulders, tension in my face. We want to intervene there, recognize, release through your body, refocus. And then with the refocus, we could say, what am I thinking about right now? That's okay to do in that moment and say, I'm thinking that if I don't get this work done right now, that I'm going to get fired. Or I'm thinking that if I if I don't get this, if I don't do this, I'm going to be ostracized from my community. Or I'm thinking, we say, okay, was it true? Do I know that to be absolutely true? These are Katie's 4 questions. How did it make me feel? What does it make me want to do? I like this inquiry. But in order to do this inquiry, we have to have that space between stimulus and response. And then we can ask ourselves, like, what would be different if this thought wasn't here? But I think the key I want to bring you back to here around racing, busy mind is come back to recognize, release, refocus as something to play with that busy mind.
This probably relates to the next question as well, but just to make it really specific to those really heightened moments of anxiety. Quite a lot of mention in the chat, but also a specific question from Laura here. Any tips for managing panic attacks when I guess you really are in a very heightened sense of feeling in danger, and anything more? I mean, I guess the 3 R's are again potentially helpful there, but anything more on panic attacks particularly?
Absolutely, because I used to struggle with panic attacks. So I know exactly what this feels like. I sent myself to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack with a panic attack, among other panic attacks that followed. And the important thing to do is to practice this other stuff in your daily life when you're not having panic attacks, so it's more retrievable. But with a panic attack, what's happening is the blood flow has totally receded. And what we want to kind of do is tell ourselves that if I can bring the volume down on my thinking, not by trying to bring the volume down my thinking, but instead by attending to my body in a particular way, I'm just really reinforcing this and very intentionally. What's going to happen is there's, again, an inverse relationship between the part of the brain that is fueling the thinking fire around for the panic and the part of your brain that's actually present to really what's here. So if we can kind of strengthen the part that can kind of be with what's here, then over time, in the times that you're not having the panic, you're going to more likely trust yourself. And that's what it is. It's that leap of belief and trust in yourself in that moment that I know that if I can just stay with this feeling that's here and I can learn to be with it in this particular way, whether it's a soothing response or a releasing response, if I can just stay with this in a particular way, the fuel will come down from my thinking and the panic will do what it always does. If you look at the history of your panic, look at it for a moment. Let me ask you a question. Has it ever lasted forever? The answer is no, never, ever, right? But it's painful and it's awful. And the more, by the way, just so we also know, the more emotional we are in a particular moment, the more convincing our thoughts are. And that's for survival reasons. If a car is coming towards us, we don't want to think and deliberate whether we should jump out of the way or not. We just want to go, right? We don't have to think about it. So same thing, when we're in a panic mode, we think, when we're convinced 100% that this terrible, awful catastrophe is about us, about to happen. We're about to die. Something's about to happen. Something terrible is about to happen. We're convinced of it. But really what it is it's about our bodies. It's about our nervous system. If I could peel your flesh back, I would show you what's happening with your nervous system, and you'd see it. There's inflaming that's happening in that moment. And so we're in that fight, flight, freeze response. And so what we want to do is train ourselves in the in-between moments, in the easier moments, how to be with what's here. Now, if something is recognize, release, refocus. Now, if it's on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're at a 7, 8, 9, 10, and you don't have a lot of practice with that, we want to do things that are a little more extreme to support us to come into our bodies. Sometimes things like holding really, really cold ice can help snap our mind back into our body. Or again, moving our bodies with a little bit more vigorousness can help do that. We want to do things that bring our mind and our bodies. I'll just leave it with this because I know we'll move on to another question. Just know that if you practice this over time, you'll start feeling more and more confident that, I do see that things come and go, sensations come and go, and I can be with this and I can handle it. I'm going to be okay. Now I just need to do this while this nervous system reaction is here, and I'm going to ride it like a wave. I love Alan Marlatt, the late Alan Marlatt, who worked with addiction, and he had this term that he called urge surfing. And that was more around, he did it more around the urges that come over cigarette smoking, right? And how we can learn to use our breath as as a like a board and ride the urge as it arises and peaks and eventually passes away, like riding a surfboard on a wave. And panic is the exact same thing, where it's crests, it peaks, and eventually begins to fall away. And I'll just actually, there's this one thing that I think will be helpful that I'm going to add on to this. What was helpful for me is that little practice we did in the beginning here, where it was a mindful check-in, I said, right? What I did basically was I brought us through three things that are happening at any given moment: sensations in our body, emotions, and quality of our attention or our thoughts, right? That's to interrupt the autopilot. That's the point of that practice. So the first thing we want to do if we're feeling like insomnia late at night, or if our mind is racing, or if our mind is racing, or if we're feeling the panic, sometimes it's really helpful is just to kind of allow ourselves to do those three things, naming it. How's my body feeling? How am I feeling? What's here emotionally right now? What's the quality of my attention? There's many, many other things that we can kind of play with, but I just want to keep it really simple for us.
Mm. That's really powerful. And as you say, it goes beyond just panic attacks to insomnia to various relational situations we might
Because
be
it's
in.
our nervous system.
Yeah, it's part of who we are. And it brings me to a point I just saw in the chat. Somebody just asked, and I'm afraid it spun past before I saw the name, but the question was, does anxiety or experiencing anxiety mean that you're a weak person? And my response to that would be, no, it means you're a human being. I think we all have a very natural physiological response to certain situations, and it's entire everything you've talked about this evening is in some ways a kind of understandable response of our bodies and minds to the situations we find ourselves in, but sometimes it's overblown and we can learn ways to handle it better. But a particular source I wanted to come on that I'm not sure if this is actually a username or someone's actual name, but it says on the Q&A Cheatly, or maybe that's C Heatley. But the question is something that I think is so difficult, but also relevant right now. Hi, Elisha, I'm suffering from grief after losing 5 family members in the past year. So I just wanted to hear that and just say how, on behalf of everyone, how sorry we are to hear that. That must be unbelievably difficult to deal with. And heart and love going out to you. And the question continues, I'm now overwhelmed with anxiety in my daily life. Are there any tools I can use to overcome this? So I guess specifically grief in relation to anxiety, Elisha.
Sure. Yeah. What we want, I'd be curious about, and I just want to kind of, again, just notice that, and also notice that I'm also aware that how you're not alone in that. As I've heard stories of many people who have lost many family members in the last year, and and what a tragedy that is. And so I'm feeling that right now too. And what comes up for me is, how do you hold the feeling? It might be that the sadness is so overwhelming that what comes up is it turns into anxiety. And there might be other things how do I handle all these things by myself? And I'm curious about who else is in your community, or who else you're connected with, because that's something that we don't want to go through just alone. And we want to see, are there grief groups? I don't know where you are in the world, but we want to connection creates resiliency in nature and in human beings. So first I want to see if we can kind of work towards you sensing right now into the community of thousands of people around the world right now. We're hearing you, and I want everybody, the thousands of people around the world right now. And by the way, this is across space and time, because some people will be listening to the recording of this, who are placing their hands on their heart and thinking of you right now and being with you in this type of way. And I want you to, if at all possible, sense that. And then your job is to really just take these days one moment at a time, one day at a time, and not moving past one day at a time. And seeing, are there other people around me that I can be connected with that can be a support? And I'm just going to stay with something that can support me in being present and active in my life, but most of all, just loving myself through this time? What does that look like for me? Yeah.
Elisha, a very wise and warm response to a really difficult question. And we're rapidly running out of time. And I'd love to, before we leave, just to say a bit more about some of the resources that you have available to the community to use and to share with others. But I feel motivated after what the question just shared so movingly and your response to it, to invite you to maybe just help us do another minute or so of just mindful reflection. And I feel what's come up for me here that I know is a big theme in your work is this sense of compassion for others. You reminded us through the environment work how much we are connected to each other. I wonder if there's some sort of mindful exercise we could do briefly just to bring that sense of care and kindness towards each other as well as to ourselves.
You know what I like to do, Mark? And this is just totally spontaneous because I do this in some of my work, and this might seem, you know, in the spirit of mindfulness. First of all, everyone here who's on this call, listening to it live or the recording of it, I want you to sense into this phrase, just like me, for a moment. I want you to sense into the thousands and thousands of people here who all have a collective underlying need of wanting to feel cared about and understood and feel a sense of belonging. Just sense into the thousands and thousands of people around the world right now. Again, imagine the globe. That's literally a huge global group right now that's here. And seeing everyone in your mind, seeing their hearts beating. In your mind, it's as if you're seeing them. And in your mind, you're saying, just like me. Just like me. Everyone here wanting to feel cared about and understood. Feel a sense of belonging. And we're breathing in one for me. Breathing in one for me, this sense of breathing in this nourishment. And breathing out, imagining that spreading across all the minds and hearts that are here right now. And seeing their friends and family and animals that they're connected to or people they work with. Allowing that network to grow and allowing that to grow to their friends and family and people they work with until you see the network wrap around the entire globe, because it very quickly would. Breathing in one for me, the sense of nourishment, the sense of caring, the sense of belonging. Breathing out, allowing that to wrap around the entire globe. Whatever you're wishing for everyone right now. Now gently opening your eyes, and we're going to do something together. And this, again, you can choose to do this or not. And your mind might say this is corny, but I just want you to try it. I want you to move towards your camera and as if you're seeing everyone in this world, and you'll see me and Mark do this. I want you to move towards it and wrap your arms around it as if we were all moving towards a giant embrace. Okay, ready? Go. Do it.
Yeah.
I want you to feel the thousands of people around as if you're feeling, you're sensing them in this giant embrace together. Okay.
Wow. I've got kind of tingles down my spine from that exercise and that sense of togetherness, which I always feel in these events, but feeling particularly strongly now. Elisha, we're sadly out of time. That's been an incredible conversation, and you have some incredible resources available that people can sort of get involved with. I guess the starting point would be to join your Mindful Living Collective. Is that right?
Yeah, Mindful Living Collective is a beautiful global community. I have a ton, which is a wonderful place to start. I have a ton of resources and videos on my YouTube channel. I'm letting one go to next week around 7 ways to ease an anxious mind and be happier. So that'll be coming out next week. So you can head over there and subscribe to that channel, and that would be great. We also have a fantastic mindful life practice group, a committed group that practices together. Lots of ways that you can access and get support, and yeah, find more resilience during this time.
Um, Amazing. We will, as always, send around a link to everyone who's been part of this tomorrow with a connection to the video, the chat, so you can see any of the messages that were shared, and also to some resources, including the Mindful Living Collective and some other fantastic things that Elisha has available. I wanted to end by expressing my gratitude, firstly, to all of you for being here, and for all of those of you who chose to make a voluntary donation to support Action for Happiness, our charity that allows us to continue putting on these events with amazing people from all around the world. So if you haven't already made a donation and you've enjoyed this, then please feel free to support this ongoing mission we all share. And I'm particularly grateful, Elisha, to you for sharing your time and wisdom with us this evening. It's been an amazing experience, and I'd love to invite you maybe to share one final thought with us before you go.
If you can, we can walk through the world recognizing that connection is at the epicenter of well-being. Connection to ourselves, like when we just kind of default to that connection to ourselves, finding connection with other people and our environment, even nature. That's what it just shows up in nature all the time, shows up in our lives. That connection is really at the epicenter of well-being. And so consider that as a meditation that we leave with.
Wonderful. Well said. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for having me.